When one thinks of British canals, we conjure up images of the northern industrial towns, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds. But a hidden gem of these industrial holders is the Regents Canal. Opened in 1820, it connected the River Thames with the Grand Union Canal, cutting through the London boroughs of Tower Hamlets, Hackney, Islington, Camden, and Westminster. Passing by such London landmarks as King's Cross St Pancras, London Zoo, Primrose Hill, and Camden Town. Originally purposed to transport goods between the Midlands and the docks of London, it was with the growth of rail and road cargo that the canal eventually fell into decline. However, in 1979, the canal saw a new lease on life, as the national grid would use the waterway as a cooling method for electrical wiring for the city. In addition, like many other former industrial sites in the UK, Regents Canal has become a major walking and cycle path through the capital, with National Cycle Route 1 running along the towpath of the Regents between Limehouse and Mile End. Nowadays, the Regents Canal is a nice break from the rush of the capital, offering a view into London's history that is seldom seen, and is overall a nice relaxing walk. Starting where the canal meets the Thames, we head north, reaching our first location of interest, the Limehouse Basin. Opening alongside the Regents, the basin acted as a transfer point between the Port of London and the English canal system, through the Regents Canal and the Limehouse Cut. The basin ended commercial usage in 1968 and was then used primarily as a refuge for Thames cruise tours, due to it being protected from the Thames tidal systems. A number of gentrified shops can also be found in this area, mostly restaurants and bars, along with access to the DLR. Continuing up on a 2-mile walk later, we reach our next major location, Victoria Park. One of London's most visited green spaces, with approximately 9 million visitors every year. It first opened in 1845, skirting the north bank of the Regents and the border of Tower Hamlets and Hackney. It covers an area of around 213 acres of open space. Being quite close to the canal is the park's Chinese pagoda fountain lake, which was left derelict in the 1950s, but was restored in a 2010 refurbishment of the park. It makes for a nice, calming spot to relax. Being located in the historically working-class East End of London, Victoria Park has gained a reputation as a people's park, being the site of many counter-culture demonstrations and concerts over the years, making it an interesting historical site to add to our tour as we continue along and people watch. Travelling on for another mile and a half into Hackney, one would come across the Kingsland Basin, a curious remnant of this area's industrial past. Opening 2 years after the Regents Canal in 1822, it served a few brick factories in what is the De Beauvoir town area of Hackney. A lot of these factories have since been demolished to make way for housing developments, leaving just the Kingsland Basin as a remnant of this industrial history. Onwards then, and we come into Islington, where we have a pair of basins. These are the Wenlock and City Road basins. The Wenlock was constructed in 1826 to service the local warehouses, which have long since been replaced by apartments and an art gallery, the Victorian Miro. While the Wenlock Basin has a fairly uneventful history, the same cannot be said for its neighbour, the City Road Basin. Built along the Regents Canal, City Road's location in central Islington made it an incredibly influential bit of real estate for goods distribution, with many firms moving from Paddington to City Road. After losing goods to the railways, the City Road Basin was left in disrepair until redevelopment began in 2004, where it was open to public access for the first time. It is also home to the Islington Boat Club, which offers canoeing for many local schools. Just a little further west of the City Road Basin is the Islington Tunnel, which runs for roughly a mile under the borough, making it the longest canal tunnel in London. Lacking a towpath, barges would be winched through by a pulley system, which has long since been made defunct by modern narrowboats having on-board motors. For those following the canal, however, to reach the other side of the tunnel, a series of waymarkers have been placed in the pavement above, allowing one to stay following the canal as it passes through the tunnel, along with allowing one to sample the sights of Islington and the hustle-bustle of this borough. Barely a stone's throw away from the end of the Islington Tunnel is Battlebridge Basin. This particular basin was originally used for warehouses, storing Norwegian ice and distributing it into the surrounding area. In modern times, it is home to King's Place, which is the current home of the newspaper The Guardian, and the London Canal Museum, which is located in one of the former ice storage warehouses. It's worth a look if you haven't. They have some interesting stuff in there. Crossing into Camden, we find nestled next to the Eurostar track coming out of King's Cross Station is the aptly named St Pancras Basin, along with Granary Square. Here one can find the only floating bookshop in London, Words on the Water, which resides in a modified narrowboat. The basin here was obviously used to serve King's Cross and goods transfers, but was soon overshadowed by its railway counterpart. This led to the other basin, now Granary Square, being covered over and a number of Granary Square today is home to London's first queer history museum, Queer Britain, along with a number of restaurants and bars that are quite high-end, mostly because they are close to one of the most important train stations in London. Another mile northeast, and we reach the historic Camden Town proper, and its infamous market. Famed for its cosmopolitan image, Camden Market has operated since the 20th century, trading the numerous goods, luxuries, and food that would be coming up and down the market, up and down the canal, and from the railways. Stepping across into our final borough of Westminster, the canal follows the northern edge of Regent's Park. Here, one can find the Fengshan Princess Chinese restaurant that will apparently serve narrowboats from a canal overlooking window. And half a mile from Camden, London Zoo. Opened in 1828, it was the first scientific zoo in the world, along with opening the world's first reptile house in 1849, public aquarium in 1853, insect house in 1881, and children's zoo in 1938. From the towpath, one can actually see into some of the aviaries, allowing canal walkers a free look at the parrots, along with the average walking and people watching of the canal. At peak summer times, a boat service also operates a gate to the zoo, only accessible from the canal, to ease congestion from the zoo's other entrances, which is just a nice little tidbit for one who is visiting London to know about. A short 8 minutes walk westwards brings us to Macclesfield Bridge. This bridge was made famous on the waterway for an incident in 1874 that gave it the nickname Blow Up Bridge. As the story goes, a barge was travelling up the Regents Canal bound for a quarry in the Midlands, with a cargo of gunpowder and petroleum. As it passed under the Macclesfield Bridge, the gunpowder somehow ignited, reducing the original bridge, besides the cast iron pillars, to rubble in an explosion that was heard from miles away, and unfortunately killed all 4 operators on the barge. When the bridge was rebuilt, the pillars were actually put on backwards, which can still be seen today by tow cable wear on both sides of the pillars. Just under a mile westwards of the exploding bridge is the Maida Hill Tunnel, along with 120 Lisson Grove, the only house that straddles the canal. Just like its longer counterpart in Islington, the Maida Hill Tunnel does not have an accessible walking path, but is located in a fairly nice bit of London to stroll about as you head to the other end of the tunnel. Maybe do a bit of shopping, who knows. But we have now completed the final half mile of our route, and we have reached the meeting point with the Grand Union Canal at the appropriately named Little Venice. Called London's Venice by poet Robert Browning, this area of Westminster more than lives up to that name, holding an annual boat rally along with more affluent Regency-style residencies and hotels. There's even a canal-side puppet show, if one is so inclined. So, that is the canal. But why? Well, it can clearly be said that a lot of the canals in Britain have been gentrified, and this canal, as can be seen, acts as a really great artery for London commuting, particularly by bicycle. Between 5 of its most iconic boroughs, along with being quite close to the Royal Mile, the City of London. And of course, having major connections there with King's Cross Station, and it gets quite close to Paddington by the end as well. But another reason is, why do people walk the canal? There is a very simple answer, at least in part, and that is, of course, one is taking up the role of the flaneur. The flaneur is a French term, and it is said to be a gentleman who spends most of the day roaming the streets, observing the earth's spectacle, the fashions in dress and adornment, the buildings, the shops, the books, the novelties and attractions, a kind of voyeur with an endless curiosity for witnessing the ordinary scenes of city life. All things that one can observe while walking the Regent's Canal. Similarly, the flaneur moves through space and among the people with a viscosity that both enables and privileges vision. Of course, this is also seen as a lot of the canal walking is a very recent phenomenon that has come with the gentrification of the canal itself, now that it is no longer used for its original purpose of transporting goods from the Thames to the Midlands and vice versa. We know that in the course of Flannery, far off times and places interpenetrate the landscape and the present moment. We can see this as well in our example of the Regents Canal, as when one walks the Regents Canal, one can get a sense of that industrial history. It is around you. You can see the towpaths. You can see these little steps that they have for the horses that would be towing the narrowboats. In case they actually fell in the canal, it'd be a way for the horse to get back out. Or, of course, the London Canal Museum itself being along this particular canal, quite literally showing you and teaching you a lot of the history of this area. And, of course, with our example of the Macclesfield Bridge and its grooves from the tow cables. And lastly, we have a quote from Houseman here. A great city, a capital above all, has a duty to present itself as equal to the role that it plays in the country. When that country is France, when centralization, which is the basis of its strength, has made the capital both the head and the heart of the social body, then the capital would betray its glorious mission, if, in spite of everything, it becomes constantly stuck in the ways of superannuated routine. Now, of course, Houseman is talking about Paris here, but we can very easily change this to be London. Quite simply, London has to show Victorian Britain. At least by Houseman's standards, and of the time. London has to show Victorian Britain. And what a better way to show Victorian Britain than the Industrial Revolution, and, by extension, the canals. So, overall, Regents Canal is an excellent opportunity for one to partake in a little bit of Flannery, along with just get a nice, relaxing walk that makes you forget that you're in one of the biggest cities in the world. Because it is just isolated from that. For the most part, there are areas where you can quite clearly tell, especially around Limehouse, where you have the DLR and then the district line go above you. But, thank you for listening to this presentation, this rather rambly ramble, if you will, along the Regents Canal.